Today we're going to do synthetic division, and so we're on day 6 of Unit 9. This should look very familiar, right, when we divide through. And let's quickly just review what we did last time, which is polynomial long division. So if we have x plus 3, and we're checking to see how many times, or if x plus 3 is a factor of x to the third plus 4x squared minus 3x minus 5. So x times what gives me x to the third? Well, x squared. Go off to the side, x squared times x plus 3. Well, that's x to the third plus 3x. And we're going to subtract that amount. And x to the third, no more x to the thirds. 4 minus 3 is 1. So 1x squared minus 3x. We're going to multiply x times x to get x squared, so plus x. And x times x plus 3, well, that's x squared plus 3x, and we're going to subtract that amount. The x squareds cancel. I get negative 3x minus 3x, or negative 6x, and then we bring down the negative 5. I need to multiply x by negative 6 to get negative 6x. Negative 6. And I get negative 6x minus 18. Now, this negative 6x minus negative 6x is really negative 6 plus 6, or 0. And I get negative 5 minus negative 18, or 13. Now, I don't have any more terms to pull, so I get plus 13 excuse me, over x plus 3. Now, we can actually do this problem in a shortened method. That shortened method is called synthetic division. The way in which we set it up is kind of like taking only the coefficients and putting it into a little system, which eliminates kind of all the excess baggage that's associated with long division of polynomials. So when we do synthetic division, basically what synthetic division is you say, okay, x plus 3, if I had a root that came from a factor of x plus 3, I would say x plus 3 equals 0. And so I subtract 3 from both sides, and I get x equals negative 3. That negative 3 gets put in this little shelf right there. And that little shelf is essentially the root, right? We're investigating whether or not that root goes into the larger polynomials. Now, what I want to do is I want to take the coefficients. So here, x to the third, that's really got a 1 in front. So I'm going to write 1. That's where the x to the third coefficient goes, the x squared, the x to the first. X to the 0 just means the constant term, right? 4 goes where the x to the squared term is. Negative 3 for the x to the first, and the constant term is negative 5. Now, with synthetic division, you have to start by multiplying. So you have to bring down the 1. So you multiply above or below, you add above. 1 comes down. Negative 3 times 1 gives me negative 3. I'm above the line, so now I add. 4 plus negative 3 is 1. Negative 3 times 1 is negative 3. I'm above the line, so I add. Negative 3 minus 3 is negative 6. I'm below the line, so I multiply. Negative 3 times negative 6 is positive 18. I'm above the line, so I add. negative 5 plus 18 is 13. Now essentially what I did was I just divided out a factor of x. And if I started out with x to the third, that means that the answer will be x squared, x to the first plus some constant, right? Well, in front of x to the first is going to be this guy. In front of x to the second will be this 1. In front of x to the first will be this guy, and minus 6. Plus a remainder of 13 over x plus 3. Notice that's the same answer I got over here. Trust me, we'll do it again. Okay, so essentially what it is you're taking out all the x values. Okay, so let's divide this guy by this. So the first thing that you want to do is you want to find the root that this is associated with. So x plus 1 equals 0, so x equals negative 1. Then you're going to write negative 1 in the little shelf, right, the negative 1. And then you're going to write the coefficients. So for the x to the third term, you're going to get 1. X to the squared term, you're going to get 2. And we can write x to the third, x to the second, x to the first, and x to the 0 up top to make sure we're accounting for everything. Here we're going to get negative 5, and here negative 6. Now, I add above the line and multiply below. I have to start by multiplying, so I have to bring down the 1. Negative 1 times 1 is negative 1. 2 plus negative 1 is 1. Negative 1 times 1 is negative 1. Negative 5 minus 1 is negative 6. Negative 1 times negative 6 is positive 6. Negative 6 plus 6 is 0. So if I started with x to the third, that means this coefficient is x to the second. This coefficient is x to the first. And this is the constant term. And there is no remainder. That means that x plus 1 is a factor of the larger polynomial, and that x equals 1 is a root of the larger polynomial. Do a few more. So, x minus 5 means we're checking to see if x equals 5 is a root, right? The opposite. Now, one thing I will note is with synthetic division, all of our divisors will only be 1x. We'll never have a 2x or a 3x or any of those, and we'll also never have any fractions, only when it's like x minus 5 or x minus 7. So here we're checking to see if 5 is a root. So we're going to pull the coefficients, right? X to the third, x squared, x to the first. X to the 0 just means constant term because anything to the 0th power is 1, right? So x to the third, that's a 1. Negative 10, 11, and 70. Now above the line we add, below the line we multiply. Have to start somewhere, so you got to bring down the 1. Have to start with multiplying. 5 times 1 is 5. Negative 10 plus 5 is negative 5. 5 times negative 5 is negative 25. 11 minus 25 is negative 14. 5 times negative 14 is negative 70. 70 minus 70 is 0, which is good. That also means no remainder. Sam, honey?
Try to get us a thing.
I will be done in a minute. You need to leave. I love you. Go. Close the door. And if I started with x to the third, that means that I now have 1x squared minus 5x right? No remainder. So there's my answer. And last but not least, we'll do one more. Now again, coefficient of 1 in front of the divisor. If we have x minus 3 equals 0, then we're checking to see if 3 is a root. Now, 3 goes in the little shelf, right? Add, multiply. We're starting out with x to the third. So make sure we go down, x to the third, x squared, x to the first, x to the 0. The coefficient in front of x to the third is 2. The coefficient in front of x squared, shouldn't it be like right here? It should, which means it's 0x squared. So we have to put in 0. Just like when we're doing long division, you have to make sure that all of the x powers have their place. So x to the third, x squared, x to the first, then x to the 0. You have to account for x squared as being 0. 0 times x squared. Then the x term has a 3 and then a 9. You have to start somewhere, so you got to bring down the 2. So you have 2. 3 times 2 is 6. 0 plus 6 is 6. 3 times 6 is 18. 3 plus 18 is 21. And 21 times 3 is 63. 9 plus 63 is 70. So this one we do have a remainder. I started with x to the third, and I just divided out an x. So we have 2x squared plus 6x plus 21 plus 70 over x minus 3.